We are in the book of Genesis, and we're in those first 11 crucial chapters, foundational chapters. If you deny them, you basically deny the whole Bible, and you end up with nothing. And so many of your most popular Bible preachers today would cast doubt on the flood and cast doubt on creation. And if I were you, I would look for different preachers. I'd look for somebody who believed the Bible just like God said it. But there are some covenants given, and I want to share some truths with you about God's covenants. In Genesis chapter 8 and verse 21, the Lord said in his heart, I'm not going to do this again. And so the first thing about his covenants is that they are unilateral. In other words, it wasn't if you do that. There are different types of covenants. We'll get into that, discuss it on different days. But these covenants were unilateral. It was God saying, I will do this. It wasn't, if you do this, I'll do this. It was a unilateral covenant. He said in Genesis chapter 9 and verse 8, I will establish my covenant with you. In verse 11, he said, I will establish my covenant with you. In verse 12, he said, the covenant which I make between me and you for perpetual generations. He said, I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. God made a one-way promise, and he said, this is how it's going to be. I will not destroy the earth again with a flood. I'll remember my covenant. It's an everlasting covenant. It says in verse 16, the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, and I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all kind. These are unilateral. These are, according to Scripture right here, eternal or everlasting. And by the way, they are of grace. We did nothing to deserve them. Man does nothing to deserve what God's doing in our lives. Gracious God who died on the cross to save us and all that he's done. This covenant is important for us. Remember the law of first mention. The first time we see something mentioned in Scripture, we realize that that's probably how God's going to use that word. So we do first mention and progressive mention and full mention. So we see how God started using that word. Did he change the way he used that word? A good example would be how the serpent is found in the Garden of Eden in Revelation, the serpent, that dragon. And so we know, and God used it all the way through the Scripture that way. Noah is the recipient of this covenant. The covenant wasn't Noah's idea, it was God's idea. It was God who decided to save the human race through Noah and his family. The covenant is one-sided. God towards Noah with no conditions. It's an unconditional covenant. It's a covenant towards all humans and all animals. He had a sign for his covenant, the rainbow. It's an everlasting covenant. There are other covenants that we'll look at as we go through the Bible. He makes covenants with Israel. That's kind of questionable today. People hate to hear that he did that, but he made covenants. He promised Abraham he would multiply his seed. And we'll see other covenants at a later time. But I just want to challenge you to know God gives his word and God keeps his word.